Hello, and a big happy 46th birthday to me. Yes, that's right. Today is this Refashionista's 46th birthday. And if you've been following me for any length of time, then you probably already know that every year I try to share something a little bit more in-depth, I guess, about myself. It all started when I started my site, and of course, just the first share post on my birthday was simply a tutorial where I kind of copycatted myself with my 4 to 40 top. And yeah, then the next year I shared my diagnosis with rosacea and kind of how I was dealing with that, as well as my rosacea covering makeup tips and reasonably priced products. And then each year I've just kind of gotten a little bit, deeper with my shares. And the year before last year, I, got quite deep into what was going on in my life, and the big move to Canada, and also some very tasteful kind of nudie pics of myself. And last year I shared the story of my 22 years living and working abroad in all the different countries and how all of that came about. I shall put all the links down below if you guys are interested in all my little birthday posts and videos that I've created. This year, though, I have decided to go even deeper, in the hopes that maybe my story will perhaps help other people, because I have found that when I share things across my social media or on my blog or in a video that are a bit personal, people do reach out to me, and it is a really great feeling to know that first, I'm not alone, and secondly, that it does actually it does help people. So these are happy tears, knowing that what I do actually does help people, be it the tutorials and sharing my knowledge about how to live a more sustainable lifestyle, how to upcycle, refashion, reuse your closets, as well as secondhand shopping tips and tricks, just all of it. It is really great to know that it does make a difference to you guys, and it does help. So hopefully by sharing my somewhat painful, very painful and traumatic journey with anxiety and how I deal with it, fingers crossed that will help somebody watching. So yeah, without further ado, this is my 46th birthday video, all about my struggles with anxiety, how I deal with it, how it all began when I was a young child, and I guess enjoy and happy 46th birthday to me!
This is Confessions of a Refashionista.
Alrighty, let's get digging right in. So, I was born in 1973, which seems like and sounds like a really, really long time ago. But I mean, really, it was only 46 years ago. So, but still, it was a different time. And unfortunately, I was born into a rather dysfunctional, toxic, and abusive family unit. Luckily, my mother escaped my abusive biological father when I was still a baby, when I was about 1.5. Now, let's fast forward a few years, and the first abuse that I actually have clear memories of, and again, this is something that I think people who haven't been abused in whichever way, don't really understand that this sticks with you forever. It never goes away. So yeah, the first abuse that I actually remember was when I was about 3 years old. So just think about that for a minute. For 43 years, I've been carrying this. I've been carrying this with me. And it really does. It shapes who you are. It shapes your behaviors. It's whatever has happened to you in the past absolutely makes you into the person that you will become and that you are presently. I didn't think this would be as hard as it is, but it's pretty hard. Okay. I don't want to get into any kind of details or, big revelations about who my abusers were. They know who they are. Members of my family know who they are. And yes, they chose to just kind of sweep everything under the carpet, and over the years, accuse me of being crazy, of all of the things that most people who are brave enough to come forward with stories of their abuse, most people are, unfortunately, by a lot of people that they know will be accused of making it up. And that's really unfortunate. But again, I'm there with you. It happened to me. And it happened to me with pretty much everything that ever happened to me. And because of that, I no longer have any contact with any of my family at all. And that was a decision that I should have made, when I left home in my late teens. But it's a decision, unfortunately, that I did have to. I guess I had to go through a bunch of extra stuff in my life and have more life experiences. And so I made the decision to cut all the toxic family members, which was all of them, out of my life when I was in my 30s, actually, in my late 30s, shortly after the birth of my daughter. And I think that was a big catalyst for that, because when you do have a child, or even I'm guessing when you become close to a child, you don't want to see them go through or have similar experiences that you had. At least that should kind of be the logical thing. But anyway, back to the story. As I said, I was about 3 years old. The first time I have a clear memory of being sexually abused. And then it just it went from there. I don't have, it's not a constant memory that I have that it happened all the time. But when it did happen, it's a traumatic thing to happen to any child. And as I said, I was not believed and I was not taken seriously. And of course, that is one of the reasons why anxiety does start. To this day, I second guess myself, and it is very difficult. So, as I said at the beginning, I'm right there with you. Anyone who has had these experiences and who does then go through their life and grow up and become an adult, and then you find that regardless of what you're doing, there's that voice in your head that is telling you, you shouldn't do that, or it's stupid, or people aren't gonna like it, or, okay. As I was saying, it is very difficult when you have these things happen to you and you get up the courage to talk about them and to reach out for help, and you are accused of lying, of making things up. And People, honestly, please believe kids. Please do, because the effect of, being not believed, being told I was stupid, being told I was crazy, all of these things, again, as a child, I have internalized these things and taken them into adulthood. And it has taken literally years to get to the point where I am now, which is sometimes I feel not very far along. But I'll get there, right? It's all about learning and growing and healing and doing the things that I need to do for myself. But as I was saying, you have to believe kids, believe people when they tell you they are being abused. Because again, it does have a terrible knock-on effect throughout their lives. And in my case, it meant that I actually stopped telling people. And it meant that I then became a target for abusers, for bullies, and I really went into myself. Something that I always could turn to, though, was books. And I became quite a voracious reader. And so much so that when I was younger, my mother used to hide my books because otherwise I would just sit in my room and read all day and all night, because that was my escape. So then moving on through a bit more of my childhood, I wasn't particularly a outgoing child, which, I mean, for obvious reasons. When you are abused and you have no one to turn to, and again, telling my fellow 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old friends, that didn't really do very much. I also had experiences, being over at a friend's house and having unpleasant things happen to me by their stepfathers, their brothers. These are all things that it doesn't necessarily mean any kind of touching type of abuse, but when you have these kind of really uncomfortable feelings and someone is saying disgusting things to a child, like just horrible things that you shouldn't even say to your adult partner in the privacy of your bedroom, let alone to your daughter's little friend who's there for a sleepover. It boggles the mind. It truly does. But I think, because I did have perhaps this kind of air of victim about me, which or an air of easy target about me because of my earlier years and my earlier experiences, I was a target for these type of people and for bullies in general. And again, listen to people when they tell you these things are happening, especially parents. Listen. I did not have parents that listened to me. I had parents who basically condemned me and put me down, and even went so far as to punish me sometimes for things that, for whatever reason, they didn't want to believe, they didn't want to get their heads around. And as I said, all of these people have been out of my life now for nearly a decade, which, and during that decade, I have done a lot of healing simply because I do not have that still in my head, and I do not have to communicate with these people anymore. And that is something else. You should never, never, never feel guilty for cutting toxic, hurtful people out of your life. Ever. If you do this, you will feel so much freer and so much better. And you know what? You don't owe these people anything. These are people who weren't there when you needed them. And throughout my growing up and teen years, regardless of what happened, I was not supported. I was not believed. And yeah, like I said, it's just a shame that it took me so many years to realize I don't need these people. But I think, again, that also comes from growing up in a society where every television show, every TV commercial, every magazine ad is so like family, family, family. Oh, you can do nothing without your family. And that's simply not true. I've done more without having the support of my family than I ever could have achieved by having them actually in my life. So yay me. And that is something that, although it is sometimes incredibly lonely, and it is unfortunate, that my kiddo doesn't have extended family or grandparents or anything like that. For myself, for her, it is absolutely the healthier option to not have these people in our lives. So yeah, I think we can kind of close that chapter. So during all of this, abuse that was going on, I did manage to make a few really good friends during elementary school. And then unfortunately, we ended up moving to a completely different city because my stepfather got a promotion and yada, yada, yada. And we ended up moving in the middle of the school year when I was in grade 5. And so that was a absolutely crazy, terrible time to, the middle of the school year, to try to make friends, and especially in elementary school where kids have been going to school together since kindergarten. And then I was the kind of weird new kid. And by that age, by age 11, I had definitely developed a lot of quirks to deal with my anxiety and the friends that I had in my old school, in my old city, I pretty much grew up with them. And so we loved each other and all of each other's quirks. But these new kids, they really didn't like me very much. And it also didn't help that when we did move, we actually ended up staying in quite a nice hotel that was paid for, of course, by my stepfather's company, because our house was not yet ready to move into. I guess I should also say that, once my mother left my abusive biological father, then when I was 7, she did marry my stepfather, and I come from a rather upper middle class background with, the nice big house and etc. And again, I guess coming from, a family that from the outside looked pretty perfect, with smart, attractive children and parents who had intelligent, well-paying jobs, and my mother did absolutely put on a very good show and a very good story for the outside world looking in, which of course did not help my case when I was trying to tell people about the reality of my life. But again, it's I'm not doing that, as is pretty obvious from what I share on my site and the kind of life path that I have chosen. Anyway, so when we did move, sorry, I keep veering off on little tangents here. When we did move, I did not have any friends whatsoever. And that is when the bullying in school really started to get ramped up, you know, when in the other city where I had my little group of friends, we all could protect each other. And if someone was, you know, bullying, it was like, we could bully back, I guess, as kids do. But in this new school, I was definitely an outcast. And it really didn't help, I don't think, that even though I did come from a rather well-off background or family, I didn't have the right clothes and I didn't have the right haircut. And my mother gave me these awful perms. I mean, it was the 80s. What are you going to do, right? And, you know, I was kind of funny looking. But again, isn't everybody in those kind of pre-teeny, teeny years? I mean, really. Just one quick story. There was a boy in one of my classes who every single day would spit in my hair. Like every single day would, and not just, but like one of those spits in my hair. And when I told the teacher about it after this going on for quite a few months, you know, because I was scared, she said, oh, he probably likes you. Which, again, as we know today, and as it should have been known forever, no. If a boy is bullying, hurting, abusing a girl, that doesn't mean he likes her at all. Not at all. It is abuse. It is crappy. It is a terrible, terrible thing. And take it seriously. So again, I learned not only could I not talk to my parents about this, I also couldn't go to my teacher or the school when I was having a hard time because of what? Because in their minds, bullying didn't exist and kids who did that to each other liked each other. This makes no sense whatsoever. You know, it didn't make sense then to my 11-year-old brain, and it doesn't make any sense now to my 46-year-old brain. If an adult was literally hawking loogies into another adult's hair at the office, don't you think HR or a boss or a manager might do something about it? Or do you think that the boss would say, oh, no, don't worry, Linda. John just likes ya. Doesn't make any sense. Cuckoo. So I've already talked a little bit about the effects of all of this kind of had on me. And again, now as an adult, I can see that it was anxiety. It was, and not the beginning stages of anxiety. It was, you know, I had anxiety since I was a very little girl. And again, it's manifested itself in, I had great fears of anything unknown. Going to somebody's house, to a birthday party, I would get the shakes, I would sweat, I would still go, but it was not necessarily a super fun time until I could find someone there that I could kind of latch onto and feel comfortable with. I also bit my nails. And I bit my nails actually until I was about 33, 34 years old, when I finally, you know, managed to stop. And now I have quite nice fingernails. Yay. And something that, you know, I always tell myself when I look at my daughter and I see that she has none of these little quirks, as they were called when I was a kid. She doesn't bite her nails. She is very outgoing. She might be a bit shy at times to meet somebody new, but she doesn't get anxious. She doesn't get the shakes. None of this stuff happens to her whatsoever. And she also comes to me whenever she has a problem with anything, because she knows I will believe her and I will calmly talk to her. And when she did have a problem with a bully at school, I, of course, spoke immediately. The very next day I spoke with the teacher and we sorted it out. And while she and this bully, of course, aren't friends, they do now play with each other during recess. And that particular girl is now not bullying anyone. My daughter was not her only victim, of course. That's not how bullies work usually. But it's very sad to me that none of the other parents mentioned anything about this, even though they knew about it, because I would see them on the playground. And once I kind of figured how severe this bullying was actually getting, I approached them and said, hey, do you know that this is happening to your daughter as well? And they did. And I don't know if it's a cultural thing. Again, I did grow up in Canada. And obviously, I grew up in a family that didn't believe me and didn't do anything, didn't approach the school, did nothing, didn't take me out of situations when I said, this person is making me feel uncomfortable. I still had to go to see that person and interact with that person. So again, I'm not sure if it is just society in general in Canada, but I don't like it. And I don't think that it is fair on our kids. It definitely wasn't fair on me or anyone else who had this type of stuff happen to them. And I think sometimes I find with the other parents at the school, first of all, I'm not popular at all with the parents at the school. I don't belong to the parent council, even though, I did think about joining, but then because of the kind of silly mean girl treatment that I have received for the last couple of years on the playground during school pickup and drop off, I mean, I don't want to interact with these people, I do other things with the school in a volunteer capacity. I don't need to interact with people who, for some reason, they're still stuck in their high school me and making fun of people and talking behind people's backs. Perhaps it is because I lived and worked abroad in different cultures for over 22 years before returning to Canada. And I do have such a huge amount of life experience. And, like I said, living in other cultures, just experiencing so many different types of people and in my life, learning different languages, adapting to different situations. I think that really does give me a unique perspective. Whereas, sadly, a lot of these other parents in particular don't have that unique life experience. They were born in this area, they grew up in this area, they married someone from this area, and they stay in this area. And that, now their kids are going to the very same school that they went to, which is just mind-boggling for me, because no way could I ever do that. Like, just stick somewhere. I mean, hey, cool. If that's what makes them happy, that's awesome. The problem I have is that they are quite small-minded. Now, not all of them are, but the ones, sadly, that I have interacted with are. And because I am different and I am unique and I am quirky, and I guess because I do what I do online, they all, have had a chance to check me out and have formed their own opinions. And for whatever reason, they're not pleasant opinions. Which again, I mean, I kind of have to laugh, because these are people who've never really spoken to me, have not interacted with me, and yet think it's okay to gossip about me on the schoolyard. I have shared a few stories about this on my social media. But again, this type of behavior from them definitely doesn't help my social anxiety. But I mean, how I deal with it, because sometimes, you know, when I think about, I wake up in the morning and I think, oh, you know, I have to take my kiddo to school, and I don't want to have to even see these people, you know, from afar. It just, your heart starts racing, you get a bit sweaty, and, you know, your mouth feels like it's full of cotton. But again, you got to do it. And I get a lot of strength and stuff from my kiddo, because again, she's not like that at all. Thankfully, because she hasn't had, you know, the same experiences, luckily, that I had as a kid. But anyway, so here's just one of the interactions that I've had with these mean moms, like mean girls. But yeah, that so reminded me of, you know, the bullies and the silliness that I had experienced in high school. Even though, you know, I mean, again, at over 40 years old, this just shouldn't be happening anymore. I mean, come on. But anywho, so I took my kiddo to the school drop off in the morning, as you do, and we're all, you know, waiting in the playground, and I would say about 1.5 meters, not that far away from me, was 3 mothers that I had seen around, as you do, but again, I'd never one time spoken to these people. I like to think that I always try to actually have a rather neutral or even pleasant expression when I'm just kind of standing and waiting. I have really not been told I have resting bitch face ever. I maybe have resting quirky face sometimes, or I do tend to think of a funny thing and then laugh out loud occasionally. But other than that, I hope I'm relatively approachable. But as I said, I've never spoken to these ladies, and they were close enough to me that I could hear what they were saying. And, you know, my ears kind of pricked up when I heard one of them say, oh, yeah, you know, there, the brown jacket, she thinks she's so great because she lived in other countries. And yeah, she, you know, have you seen her website? Just a bunch of still. And so of course your ears prick up. I mean, I was brown jacket, right? And yeah, and I stood there having, you know, an anxiety attack. Basically, I was having trouble breathing. I was sweaty. I'm not sure if other people experience this, but because I also have rosacea, it's like I can feel from about here, my whole neck and cheeks and everything, all up my face. It just feels like heat. And I'm always super concerned that when that happens, I feel like my face is just a fireball of redness. It's usually not, because I do have, you know, a little hand mirror, and I do check occasionally to see, oh, am I standing here looking hilariously red? But thankfully, a lot of the times it's not. But so I was experiencing all of this, and then I did my breathing exercises, which I take a deep breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and then slowly breathe it out for 4 seconds. And I do that until I start to feel calm again. And then I thought, you know what? Let's just go introduce myself. And so I took 3 business cards out of my wallet, and I walked over and I said, hi there, I'm Sheri, I'm mom, and yeah, I've never met you guys, but I thought I'd come over and introduce myself, as you're obviously talking about me and you've checked out my website, which, as you know, is full of sustainable lifestyle tips and tricks and refashioning tutorials. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's a whole section all about making stuff with your kid and for your kid. Anyway, here's my card if you'd ever like to get in touch and actually talk to me instead of just gossiping. And then I walked away. And I felt terrible, to be honest with you. because again, this is something else that does go along with anxiety. And even though it should have been like this big, wonderful kind of movie moment, at the end of the day, I felt really crappy that I had done that, even though I didn't do anything wrong, and I was polite and I was pleasant, and you know, it was actually them that were being gossipy old bitty bullies. But again, that such is the monster of anxiety, is you are constantly second, third, fourth, fifth, 100 times guessing and overthinking something you might have said, something you might have done. And even if it's the tiniest thing ever, you know, you remember something that you did in 2004, you know, you accidentally farted in public and someone heard you. And then now it's 2019 and you're lying in bed thinking, oh my God. Which, I mean, at the end of the day, go ahead and fart in public. Who cares? You know, everybody farts. It's not a terrible thing. But if you do it, own it and either say, whew, pardon me, or, you know, laugh and put your hand up. But I mean, come on, don't just crop dust and walk away. That's terrible. And stop doing that in thrift stores, people. Seriously. So throughout my preteen, teen years, it was kind of more of the same, you know, bullying and not being able to feel like I could stand up for myself. Again, not having anyone that I could talk to about anything, as unfortunately, you know, because of this move, I really didn't have any close friends. I did manage to make one very good friend in high school, and we were friends pretty much all through high school, and we pretty much only had each other, which was fine. She didn't come from the same background as me. She came from a very supportive family and a very loving family. She had all the cool stuff. She had a car in high school. Yeah, she just, you know, wasn't at all like these cliquish, mean girls. And we made each other laugh, and we had the exact same sense of humor. And it's unfortunate that, you know, as you get older, and of course I didn't leave the country, so you lose touch with people. But it was a good start to my healing to have such a good friend in high school, even if I did only have one. But there are just a few little stories here that I would like to share, because I do think other people will have had similar experiences. And again, it's nice to know that you're not alone out there. So yeah, as I said, I only did have this one friend, and by the time I reached high school, I had discovered the transformative, magical power of the dramatic arts. And, you know, I loved drama and I loved performing because I could be a totally different person. And I was, and I still am, pretty darn good at, you know, creating characters and becoming different characters, especially comedic, over-the-top characters. And anything I was cast in high school, I was the comic relief. And I think that's because I really did love that escape, and I really threw myself into those characters. Now, of course, the bullies in high school took that as a reason, I guess, to make fun of me and to bully me. And there was, of course, anyone who's been to a big city high school, or maybe even small towns, I don't know. I went to a big city high school. You have your cliques, right? And you have like the jocks and the cool kids and the popular kids, who I never understood why they called themselves the popular kids, because popularity is like a lot of people like you. And at the end of the day, not a lot of people actually liked this group. They were just the biggest group with, usually the wealthiest parents, and the cars, etc., etc. And they kind of ruled the school, and I never really understood, and I still don't understand to this day, how they kind of get away with that. But it appears they still do. So I'm really hoping by the time my kiddo gets there that something's changed and these kind of horrible cliques aren't in existence quite so bad as they were in my day. Anywho, so there was this one particular group of girls who, I'm not sure if it was because I was a bit smaller than everybody, and again, I definitely did not have the cool clothes at all. I actually wasn't allowed to shop at thrift stores, and if you listen to some of my podcast interviews, you'll know this already, but that was another for some reason, another thing that was kind of taken away from me as a child, and it really would have helped if I could have gone to the thrift stores and spent my own money, my own babysitting money, and gotten the clothes to at least fit in, with how the other kids looked at school. But I did not. I had, those awful bargain house kind of jeans that had the wrong stitching and, just bad. And again, the wrong kind of hair, and I wasn't allowed to wear makeup, and it just, I was just, a mess for, according to these girls. I mean, in actuality, I was just like a normal kid who liked acting in drama and being funny, but for some reason to them, I was incredibly offensive. One particular day, I mean, they always made fun of me and would make a point of, hip checking me into a locker. And one particular day, I'm actually not sure at all what I had done or what, again, I never did anything, but the perception was there that just by me breathing and being in the same hallway as them, that was crime enough. Anyway, so they one of them shoved me into the bathroom as I was walking past, and the other two were already in the bathroom, and they shoved my head in the toilet and they flushed it 3 times. And something, again, things you never forget. And, just to this day, I hear that laughter, and just this incredible confusion of first being shoved and then grabbed and having your head, shoved into the toilet is pretty traumatic. I mean, I guess the only positive thing is I didn't have this luxurious long hair back then. I had very short, almost like a Vanilla Ice type haircut. So I guess that kind of saved me a bit from, I don't know what, being totally sopping wet when I finally was allowed to get up. And then after that happened, of course, I didn't want to go to school. And regardless, I always had to go to school. I mean, even if I was super sick and throwing up, I had to go to school. Anywho, yes, so after the whole head in the toilet swirly debacle, I obviously didn't want to go to school, but I knew I couldn't say anything at home because what was going to happen? That my mother would tell me the same as she always did. Oh, stop doing whatever you're doing and stay away from them, which is great advice. When your kid tells you the horrible things bullies are doing, you say, oh, it's your fault and you need to stay away from them. Fantastic. Anywho, so I would leave in the morning like I was walking to the school bus. Now, I guess luckily both of my parents worked, and they worked from quite early in the morning until quite, late in the evening. And so I was able for a couple of days to get away with, sneaking back home after I knew that they wouldn't be there anymore. My fateful mistake, though, was when I actually called the school and pretended to be my mom and said, you know, Sheri is sick, yada, yada, yada. Long story short, they obviously knew it wasn't my mom, probably because I had the voice of a 6-year-old. And yes, so my mother was actually called, and in my high school, regardless if you skipped school once or 50 times, you got suspended for 3 days, which doesn't make any sense, right? Because that's actually, you don't want to go to school. So, okay. So punish me with what I actually am trying to achieve. Doesn't make sense, but what are you gonna do? So, something that the school also did, they would announce the suspensions. And so when I returned to school after my 3-day suspension, I actually had a couple days where I was thought of as tiny bit cooler than I actually was, because my name was actually announced as, you know, one of the kids who was suspended. So I had a tiny bit of coolness in the eyes of these terrible popular kids for a couple days anyway, until, of course, I don't know, I wore the wrong shirt again or something, and then the bullying all started all over again. But yeah, so there's another fantastic story to add to the pile, you know, of the social anxiety that I experience, you know, quite badly now. But again, I probably wouldn't be who I am today, as I am fond of telling myself, if these awful things hadn't have happened to me. And I think that's kind of a healthy way to look at it, is that, you know, to try to turn it around for myself. Another disturbing and quite frightening story that I have from my high school teen years, when I was in, I think, about grade 11. It was the middle of winter and very high snow and pitch black in the morning. And now by this time, I wasn't taking school bus anymore. I had to take the public transit to get to school, which was terrifying for me with my anxiety, my undiagnosed anxiety, of course, at that time. And what was even scarier is where my bus stop was, there was like no street lights at all, for some reason. And again, it was quite a main busy road, but it was like, there was a little kind of mini market thing, and then you walked a little bit, and then there was, where there should maybe have been 3 streetlights, there was none. And I don't know if that's because it was kind of in between traffic lights and they only kind of thought to put 2, but there wasn't enough. So where this particular bus stop was, it was quite dark, and it had a bus shelter because, again, cold Canadian winters, most bus stops have a bus shelter. Now, on this particular day, it was incredibly cold and windy, and I had begged my mother to could she please drive me to school? So, of course, the answer was no. And so I trudged through the snow to this bus stop, and I got to the bus stop, went in the shelter because it was windy and it was snowy. And as I'm standing there, a man came running across the street from the kind of, you know, suburbia area that was across the street, and came in the bus shelter, you know, nodded hello to me, and I went into the other side of the bus shelter because, you know, I was terrified. And I could hear a sound that I didn't really know what the sound was. Now I'm well versed in what this sound is. And I turned my head, and this man, who at the time, he seemed really kind of old to me, but he was probably just in his mid-30s, was standing there wanking at me, who was, 14, 15-ish at the time. And so he's wanking at me. And I stood there for a second in shock. And then he said to me, and again, things you never forget, I come out here and do this every morning. It really warms me up. And so I immediately ran out of the bus shelter and took off towards the little mini market that was there. And there was like a 24-hour shop in this little mini mall. And so I ran in there and I was crying and very distraught. And the man behind the counter, came around and was, oh, what happened? What happened? And so I was super embarrassed. I didn't know what to say. So I just pointed and said, there's a man in the bus shelter, doing things. And he ran out. And of course, in the meantime, this guy had run back across the street. And then I saw my bus coming. And so the man wanted to call the police. And I said, no, I'm going to miss my bus. And then I'd get in trouble. And again, just all of this, you just think like, this happened to me. And again, I was feeling guilty. I was worried about getting in trouble. And that's not right. It's not right. It should have been that I had the confidence to stay there, to have this shop proprietor who was being very kind to me, to have him call the police, to make a report. But I couldn't, because I knew I would get in trouble if I missed my bus and I was late for school. And also, of course, my parents wouldn't believe me that this happened. But again, this is just another incident that really shaped, who I am. And I absolutely took a lot of shit from men over the years. And I don't anymore. Not at all. Not at all. If I am catcalled, I walk straight over to whoever did it and question their motives. Why are you doing this? And 9 times out of 10, there's no response. They walk away. They don't want to deal with me. Unfortunately, the other day, I'm 46 years old. There's no age limit on this kind of that happens to us every single day. The other day I was in the supermarket with my daughter and, shopping like you do. And I was looking at the cucumbers, and a man much larger than me came up behind me, pressed his body into mine, and said into my ear, "You like him big, don't you?" And I kind of went a bit feral and gave him one of these and one of these. And then I turned around and screamed at him, "Off! Get the off me!" There was other people in the supermarket and no one did anything except a stock boy who ran after the man, who of course ran away because that's what they do, right? They assault and then they run away. And this young man came back, and when he came back in the store, and again, no one approached me at all. No one said anything. This is shocking to me. And when he came back in the store, he came over. He said, he apologized. He said, "I'm really sorry that happened. And I'm really sorry as well that I couldn't catch him. Are you okay?" And yeah, I said, "I'm okay." And my daughter was like, "Yes, we got him." And, because she joined in, she gave that guy a good kick as well. And which tells me I'm doing something right. And Again, it's just very disturbing that why did nobody, even like the people who were near me, looking at the vegetables beside the cucumber area, they didn't do anything, and that I don't get it. I don't understand. If I ever see a woman, a girl, anyone who looks uncomfortable on the bus, for example, or anywhere, I absolutely go over and say, hey, do you know this guy? Is this guy bothering you? Shall I walk with you? Can I sit here with you? I don't understand. I don't understand. Why are people very quick to judge others, but not so quick to help someone out? Why is that? I know, this video is getting longer, it seems. However, in this final segment, I would like to share a couple more traumatic yet very defining moments from my past, as well as the effects that all of these abuses and traumas have had on me, plus how I manage my anxiety and basically kind of push myself through those moments in time where life seems to be very difficult, and of course a lot more difficult thanks to that anxiety monster that is constantly hanging around on my shoulders. So this tale of woe happened when I was in my mid-teens, and for quite a few years already, I was a non-believer, an atheist, and that's also what makes this so much more traumatic for myself. As I was saying, in my mid-teens, for unknown reasons, my mother decided to send me to a Christian youth group. She had met a neighbor whose late teen-age daughter was a member of this local Christian youth group, and obviously offered, I don't know, to convert me back. I don't know. Anyway, so for about a week, she was telling me, this weekend, this is what you're doing this, you're doing this. I obviously did not want to go and do that. I was more than happy just to stay at home reading. But again, I was quite an obedient child, and I went because I didn't want to be punished. And this particular youth group at this particular time, they were going to do a campfire. And so I went to this girl's house, and of course she was older, had her driver's license in a car, so we drove there. And I just basically, was trying to keep myself to myself. As a non-believer, this was, it had nothing for me. But I thought, okay, whatever, let's just go. Of course, it was a very uncomfortable situation. And so sitting around the campfire, they were, singing, chatting, and something that was, for me, very strange, that this Christian youth group, they had like a cooler full of beer, and, offered me some. I did not want any. And yeah, I just wasn't that kind of a kid. I was really a quiet, shy, keep myself to myself and read my books kind of girl. And anyway, about, I'd say 30 minutes or so went by, and there was, somebody who had a guitar, and they were singing songs, and they kept drinking. It was just very strange for me that that this Christian group, they were drinking, and they were all underage, of course. And one of the boys, who I guess he wasn't a boy, really, I guess he would have been closer to an adult, came and sat beside me and put his hand on my leg. And I did not like that. I moved. I went and sat beside this girl who had brought me there. And she said, oh no, he likes you, it's fine. And it wasn't fine. Then for whatever reason, they decided, hey, let's go up and walk in the woods. By this time it was quite dark, and I was super uncomfortable, but what are you going to do at that age? You know, you go along. And so I did. And as soon as we got, I don't know, maybe 2-3 meters into the woods, this boy kind of veered me off and said, oh, hey, let me talk to you. And proceeded to rape me. And I was frozen. I was absolutely frozen. And I did try calling out for help, and nobody came. And when he was done, he got up, you know, rearranged himself, put himself away, and I was on the ground, of course, wet and dirty. And he said to me, don't worry, you're still a virgin where it counts. So I got up, and I'd also like to mention at this time, I was really not developed. I was a very late bloomer. So I didn't have like normal bras or anything. I had sports bras. My kind of little sport top that I had been wearing under my massively huge sweatshirt was dirty and wet. And so I took it off and I put it in my jacket pocket and got myself fixed up as best as I could. Went back and said I had no choice. I had to stay there because my ride was there. And they came out of the woods, and I was obviously distraught. I mean, how could I not be? And I said to this girl, look, I want to go home. And I couldn't. I had to sit there until they were all ready to go. I had to sit there with this boy sitting across from me, and I just had to wait. So we finally got to go home, and I tried to tell this girl in the car what had happened, and she just wouldn't listen to me at all, and was telling me that I was lucky that this boy liked me because he was so popular in the youth group. And when I got home, obviously my clothes were not very tidy or clean. They had mud all over my jeans. My jacket had mud on it as well. And my mother got very angry at me because my clothes were dirty. And I immediately went upstairs and took a shower. And when I came out of the shower, I went in my room. My mother was in my room, and I knew I was going to get in trouble. And she had my wet, dirty sports bra in her hand and said, I found this in your pocket. And she got angry at me. And so I couldn't say anything, and I couldn't get help. And that was that. That was that. And for years I held that in. And again, it wasn't until I was an adult that I tried to talk to her about that particular incident. And as with anything I ever tried to bring up as an adult, when I kind of, you figure things out and go, this is so wrong, how I grew up in this family unit was just so wrong. And anytime I tried to bring anything up to my mother and say, look, this is what happened and this is how you reacted, again, it was pushed under the carpet, and no, you're remembering it wrong. No, this didn't happen. That's not true. And I know it's true. These are things that happened to me. And anyway, as I said, these people are no longer in my life, and I am much happier and much better for it. Something else I'd like to briefly address is when you are raised in that kind of environment and you do have abuse, your self-esteem is gone, it's nothing, and you start to believe that you deserve this kind of treatment. And one of the things that's particularly sad about this, especially for women, is the ease that we can fall into abusive relationships in our adult lives. And I, of course, fell into that trap as well. And I am a survivor of domestic violence. And this was also during the time where I was actually not living in Canada at this time. I was living by this time in a different country. And I did still have contact with my family. And this was kind of the beginning of the end, I guess, although it did still take a few years after, for the end of the relationship and me cutting off the ties, because I did reach out for help and I did not get it. I even went so far as to have photographic evidence because I thought, oh, they have to believe me. I have a picture. But no, it was, again, what am I doing? What am I doing to make him do this to me? But luckily, my superwoman strength shone through once again, and I was able to remove myself from that situation and go on to start the healing process. And as I said, that was definitely the catalyst for the next few years of convincing myself that it was okay to not want to communicate with these people or have them in my life anymore. Now, having all of these abuses and traumas since childhood, and again, there are many more, some serious, some just, kind of everyday interactions that were uncomfortable. It really does, as I said before, shape who you are as a person and open the door for all kinds of personality quirks, anxieties, and depression. And these are all things that I have struggled with over the years. And because of these traumas that I experienced, for years I was bulimic. Up until my 30s, I would binge and purge, as it was one thing that I could control. And I never ever, until quite recently, actually, I never felt good enough for anything. When the kind of blogosphere and everything started, it was quite exciting for me because it gave me first a place where I could share my knowledge with people and interact with people without actually having to interact in person, which I do sometimes to this day struggle with. But it is getting better, and every day it does get better. And again, as I said, part of that was getting the toxic out of my life. because that's the thing. It never ends. You know, even into adulthood, if I would talk to these people on the phone, there was always little comments there, you know, that just digs into you, because it never ends. They are not going to change, regardless of how many times I tried to change myself to fit this mold of a person that they wanted me to be. It was never going to be enough, because they were never willing to see their own faults and kind of meet me halfway. So as I said, do not feel guilty for removing toxic people from your life. You do not need them, and it is a very good step in the healing process to not constantly have those comments in your ear. It has taken quite a few years now for me to look at myself in the mirror, and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, like what I see. And again, having a daughter of my own absolutely pointed out all of the things that were not right and that were downright wrong that I experienced when I was growing up. And these are all things that now I use as a template for don't do these things. These are the things not to do with my own child. So again, I'm trying to turn my bad experiences into a positive and use those experiences as the roadmap to stay away from. So I guess now it's time to let's talk about something positive. Let's talk about the things that I have figured out that work for me to deal with my anxiety, and hopefully some of these might work for you. I mean, everybody is different after all. I don't actually take any medication. I just, I did have some for a little while, and I just really didn't like how it made me feel. And it also gave me incredibly bad gas. So that's not okay at all. Of course, one of my biggest tips for dealing with anxiety is actually crafting, upcycling, making, doing anything that is using your creativity, your imagination, your hands. It really does give you that relaxation and that wonderful feeling of accomplishment when you do finish a project and it either came out exactly as you thought it would, or even better, or if something did go wrong during that project, you were able to come up with a fab solution and now it's better than ever. And of course, on my site, I have hundreds of totally free tutorials that can get you started using, the stuff you already have in your house. So you don't have to have any monetary investment whatsoever. Just look in your own closet and start upcycling and refashioning using the tutorials over on my site. Other things that absolutely do help if I am out and about and a situation does arise. As I mentioned before, I have my 4-second breathing where it's 4 seconds in, hold for 4 seconds, and 4 seconds out. And this is something that you can do that nobody knows you're doing it, which is great. You're not kind of standing there hyperventilating and looking like a crazy person, even though inside most of the time that's how I feel like I am going, but in actuality, I'm just which isn't that bad. And sometimes I have to do that, 10 or 20 times before I start feeling relaxed. Something else that I often do is I literally go out of the situation. And occasionally that has meant just walking away from a conversation or a situation. And I literally just say, I'm sorry, I can't handle this right now. I need to step away for a few moments. And that's exactly what I do. A lot of my techniques for dealing with my anxiety have to do with confidence, I think, and having the confidence to put myself and my mental health first in certain situations. And again, this is something that is very, very difficult to do because we are conditioned from birth, basically, to put the needs of others first. At least most humans are kind of taught that way. Unfortunately, it's more women than men that are, conditioned that way. However, if you can get past that mental block and think, wait a minute, why is the person I'm talking to not thinking about me? Obviously, why do I have to think about their feelings? I'm having a bit of a problem right now. I need to step away and deal with that so I can communicate effectively again. There's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And again, you should never feel guilty that you are taking a few seconds, a few minutes, even a day or two for your own mental health. That is perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong with that. I do meditation as well. And this is something that I don't do all the time. I don't have a set schedule for it. It's more the kind of a thing that if I feel like I need to do it, I go ahead and do it. And of course, the internet is just chock full of loads of free, fabulous meditation, guided meditation videos and audio and all of that. It's fantastic. There's a lot of free help out there online. If you just want to take a few minutes, search around, and you can find the ones that are going to work best for you. I also try to do a daily workout, and no, this is nothing to do with an expensive gym membership, going to a gym, hiring a personal trainer. Of course not. Absolutely not. What I do are simply the very quick 5 or 7 minute workouts that you can find on YouTube. I will put the links down below to a few of the wonderful workout gurus that I love to follow along with. And again, it is basically 7 minutes of your day. And I find if I do one in the morning, it really does help to get me pumped and set for the day. And it also does calm any anxiety that I might have woken up with. This guy here is also fantastic for helping me alleviate my anxiety. And he's always good for a lovely cuddle and snuggle and kisses. Plus, going out for a walk a few times a day also helps, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. It does. So, although this 46th birthday video wasn't quite as full of jokes and humor as my other videos are, I really do hope that it gives you a better insight into this little refashionista here, as well as perhaps helps some of you with the knowledge that you're not alone and you can get past it, you can get through it, and there are ways of dealing with these things yourself if you don't have any support. Again, I'm kind of living proof that it can be done. Although it did take me, 22 years of living and working abroad in 4 different countries. But again, the life experience as well that I have behind me also does help me deal with things that do happen now. So I hope in some small way that this video has been helpful for somebody out there. I know for myself, I feel empowered to get some of my story out there. And yeah, happy 46th birthday to me!